Hi there, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Natasha. Welcome to my channel. This video is my next Pan Those Eyeshadows update. It has been, I think, 2 months at this point, but I didn't wear makeup for a couple weeks throughout that just because I was really busy and I was under the weather for a little bit. I don't plan on doing monthly updates from now on. I'm just going to make an update every time I hit pan on something. And so I do have one pan to share, so I'll be rolling one in, bringing a new one out. Rolling one out, bringing a new one in. I just wanted to mention I was trying to figure out what shirt to wear with this eyeshadow because I'm wearing like some really light green eyeshadow, and I thought, why don't I bring out the shirt that I wore in my very first video that I ever put up on YouTube over 5 years ago. Where has the time gone? I was filming in my parents' house. I still lived at home at the time, and I was really nervous, and I was very not the type of person to put myself out there, and just to think of all the things that have changed since then. I think I might have worn it a couple times since then, but it's been a really long time, so I am glad to bring it out, and I do think it goes really nicely with my makeup too. Let's take a minute to look at the eyeshadows that I have been working on for the past 2 months. And if you are new to the premise of this type of video, I randomly generate 5 eyeshadows in my collection, and I focus on all 5 of them with the hope to hit pan. And once I hit pan on an eyeshadow, I roll it out and I randomly generate a new one to take its place. So I'm working on 5 eyeshadows at any time. And this project was created by Alexi. I'll have her information, her playlists, her videos in the description box, as well as some other people that are doing Pan Those Eyeshadows in the description box, and that way if you'd like to see more content like this, there's plenty of it out there. Tons of people do this project now. Everybody kind of has their own unique spin on it, which is really cool. The way I set it up this time is I have it set up into 3 categories. So each of my eyeshadows is either in an easy, medium, or hard category, meaning how easy or hard I think it'll be to hit pan on them. And so let's start with the first eyeshadow that was in my flex category, which is what I consider to be the hardest eyeshadows to pan, and that is from the Shroud Cosmetics Creepy Cute palette, and I was working on Tombstone, which is a matte slate gray. I have reached for it a decent amount of times previously before bringing it in, but I knew that this is a type of shade that I don't reach for often and I don't use a lot of whenever I use it, and it's just not a color I gravitate towards, which is odd because I do really like cool tone eyeshadows. And oh my goodness, I have loved using this. This is such a treat. I am so pleasantly surprised, and it's from a palette that I already have used a ton. I mean, if you can see, I have 4 pans in there already. I think every eyeshadow look I'm going to share with you today, including the one I'm wearing today, incorporates Tombstone. I've just had so much fun playing around with it. I've been using it to deepen up the outer thirds. I've been using it as an eyeliner. I've been using it as a base to put other sparkly shades on top. Amazing. I've used it 21 times. I still think, I know, I have a very long way to go. It's going to take forever to actually hit pan on the shade, but oh my gosh, I'm enjoying it so much, so that's perfectly fine. And I figured the ones from this hardest category would take several months to actually hit pan on, and it's going to be even more of an accomplishment once I do. The next 2 shades are from my intermediate or my turn up category, and the first one is the shade that I did hit pan on. It's from the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette. It's in the shade Abundance, which is this satin shade right here. I had already reached for this a ton previously before I brought it in, so there was already a dip in the shadow, and I adore this shade. There were a lot of times where I just really wanted to wear only this all over the lid in the crease, and so sometimes I'd wear it on the outer third, and sometimes I would wear it as its own shade, and I just really love this color. Something in that taupiness. It's got a little bit of brown, got a little bit of warmth, like a pink to it. I think it just works really nicely with my skin tone and my eye color, and I gravitated for it so much. I used it 19 times. There is a really, really big dip in there. Number one, like I said, I had used it a fair amount of times before rolling it in. It was already a favorite shade from this palette. but also every time I used it, I did use a pretty decent amount. And this shade in particular, as I find with most of the shimmer shades from this palette, is very soft. And so there were times where I would try to be really careful with how much I picked up, but it would still sometimes just pick up and be a little bit more crumbly. So I think the formulation of this type of shade just made it a lot easier for me to hit pan on than maybe like a really tightly packed matte, which I do have one of those in my quintet and I'll talk about later. I am sad to roll out this palette because I freaking love this palette, and I did reach for a lot of other shades from this palette while I had it, but I am excited to roll it out and see what shadow I'll be bringing in its place. The second eyeshadow from my turn up category is a single from Tarte in the shade Poker Face. This is a really beautiful shimmer shade. It's a pinky taupe shade, and I did really enjoy using it. I used this one the least only because I do have another pinky shimmery shade in my quintet, and so I was kind of focusing on that one more. This one I've used 12 times. I do see a dip in it. This is a very creamy shade, and a lot of times when I use it, I just use my fingers and then I apply it on my lid. Sometimes I'll use it as an inner corner highlight, but I think it's just slightly too deep versus the other one that I'll talk about in a second. That one is light enough for me to use on the inner corner. This one's going to be a slow but steady one, but because it is a really creamy formula and because I typically use it all over the lid whenever I reach for it, I do think that I still have a good chance of hitting pan on this relatively easy. Not the easiest, but that's why it's in the intermediate category. So the other pinky taupe shade that I was talking about is this shade Bicoastal. It's from the Colourpop Making Mauves palette. I reached for this 21 times. I would say probably half of the time I used it as an inner corner highlight. That's what I'm wearing on my inner corner today. It's just a little bit brighter, a little bit lighter than Poker Face. This one definitely has a dent in it. I can see myself getting closer to the bottom of the pan. Sometimes I apply it with my finger. Sometimes I use an inner corner, like a smaller brush. So I really don't know how much longer it'll take to hit pan, but I'm gonna really enjoy using it until I get there. And who knows, maybe by next month I'll have pan on it. So Bicoastal, the shade I just talked about, was from my Gucci category, which is shadows that I think will be the easiest to hit pan on. And I do agree, I feel like that one is going to be relatively easy to hit pan on. The other one, I'm surprised. I thought it would be a lot easier to show progress, but it's very deceptive. And that is from the Colourpop Limoncello palette. It's the shade Tuscan Fun. This is a gorgeous matte orangey mid-tone brown. And with how thin the pan is, I don't know if, can you tell? Like that pan is super thin. Like let me show you the Tarte one versus the Colourpop one. The one from Colourpop, it's wider, it's larger, but the pan is a lot thinner. So I really thought that I would hit pan on this super fast. And I've used it 18 times and I've barely made a dent. I don't know. I think this is going to take a couple months, but this is a really beautiful shade that I can work into a lot of different looks. I'm wearing it in my crease and on my lower lash line today. I also really like pairing it with Tombstone, which is that really cool toned gray matte. I think mixing them together always makes for a really interesting look because they're just both on the very opposite sides of the spectrums with undertones. The gray one is super cool toned and then this one is super warm, and while I wouldn't have originally thought that they would go so well together, I do really find that they do. So I will be rolling out one eyeshadow and bringing a new one in. Let's look at my pan percentage really quickly. Last month in June, I had 29 pans, giving me a pan percentage of 12.3. I now have 30, so my eyeshadow pan percentage is 12.7. I don't have any particular goals. I just wanted to be able to look at my eyeshadow collection in a different way and quantify the change that these pans are making. I do have one eyeshadow from the ABH Sultry palette. It's that fresh matte cream shade. Can you see there's only just like a teeny little bit in the corner there? So I've been using that as an eyeshadow primer setting shade. So my total number of eyeshadows will actually go down next month. I mean, that's assuming I don't buy any new eyeshadows, which I don't think I will, but who knows. So that might also affect my pan percentage. So we'll see how that changes over time. Now let's talk about the looks that I created with these shades. I did create a look with most of the shades today. So I started with Tuscan Sun all over the crease and on the lower lash line. And then I added a little bit of Tombstone, that gray matte, on the outer thirds, and then I did put a little bit of Abundance on top of it. but I ended up covering it with this shade from the Lethal Cosmetics palette. I have loved playing around with this palette. This is one of those like build your own palette things, and it's this shade right here, which is Retrograde. I think the light is probably blanking it out a little bit, but yeah, I have Retrograde all over the lid, and then on the inner corner I used Bicoastal from Colourpop. I'm really loving these soft greens and these soft blue looks that I can create with the Lethal Cosmetics singles. I think the shades that I have in my quintet complement those a lot, and it's just a type of look that I've been really gravitating towards. So it's nice to be able to play with one of my newest palettes and still be able to get use out of some of my older stuff too. Now for look number 1, this is one of the looks where I used the warm shade Tuscan Fun in the crease, and then I used something really cool toned on the lid, and I really like how that looks. So I have Abundance on the outer third. I also have Tombstone on the outer third underneath, and then I have Bicoastal all over the lid and on the inner corner, and just a really simple kind of like steely gray eyeshadow, but then a little bit something different with that warm crease. The second look is really similar to the one that I'm wearing today. I have Tombstone all over the base and in the crease, and then I have Retrograde applied wet all over the lid. I applied a really heavy layer so that that green would really pop. And then I used Ceres, which is this corner shade right here. It looks white in the pan, but it has like a blue purple green shift, and I used that on the inner corner, and I kind of worked it all the way up to the brow bone. And I think that looked really nice. I use that shade a lot for that purpose. And I'm wearing nude suede shoes all over the lip, and then that is what I also have in my last look. Most of the lips are pretty neutral and more natural. Yeah, in look number 3, I'm also wearing nude suede shoes, and I'm wearing Tombstone as a liner, and I can do it, but it takes me a long time to get right because I'm so used to using pencils and like gel pot liners, and it's definitely something that I have to do before I do my base makeup, so often I forget to do that because I usually do my face first. So I used it a couple times as a liner. I do like how it looks, how it's a little bit more smoky and soft, but I think just like the actual act of applying it that way takes more time. And then like to accidentally get a tiny smidge of that powder on your under eyes, it's really hard to clean up. So I don't do it a ton. I am glad that I tried it a couple times and I liked it, but it's not something I'm going to do all the time. And then I have Tuscan Fun all over the crease, and then Bicoastal all over the lid. This next one, oh, I loved this one. Okay, so I'm using Tombstone again all over the base and in the crease, and I am using Bicoastal on the first half of the lid to have like a tiny bit of a pinky shift there, but then I used Cosmic Love from the Huda Beauty palette, which is one of my favorite shades, and I used that on the outer half to have a little bit of like a blue purpley look, and I loved how this look turned out. Like I'm saying, I love those soft greens and blues on the lid. I think that's just like so perfect for this time of year. And then in the last one, I also reached for more Lethal Cosmetics singles. So I have Tuscan Fun all over the crease. I have Tombstone on at the outer third, and then I put Abundance over top of it. And then on the lid, I used Arcade, which is kind of like a pinky gold shade. It's really beautiful. It has like a pink base, and then it has a like a goldy green shift to it. So I put that all over the lid, and then I put Ceres on the inner corner, which is a white with like a blue and purple shift. So up top is Arcade, and underneath it is Ceres, and if you can see in like the way those flip and the way the light hits them, like I don't think that these pictures do the look justice. It just looked so multi-dimensional and ethereal and beautiful, and I loved how it looked. And on the lips, I have Nude Suede Shoes as my liner, and then I used a lip oil from Merit in the shade Pink Beat on top. And those are some of my favorite looks that I created with my quintet. Now let's move on to my favorite part of the video, where I get to roll in a new shade. So Abundance, the shade that I hit pan on, that is from my intermediate category, my turn up category. And so I'm going to roll from that list specifically to bring a new one in its place. And I have 127 shades that I think are part of this group. So I have my Pretty Random app, and I have the minimum as 1 and the maximum as 127. And the number I got is number 82. And the shade I got is from an ABH palette, and it's the shade Orange Soda, which I think is from my Soft Glam Mini. Yes, okay, it is. It's from my Soft Glam Mini. It's this shade right here. This is so pretty. Let's see how similar it is to Tuscan Fun. Okay, so up top is Orange Soda and underneath it is Tuscan Fun. So these are different enough for me to be okay having them both in the rotation. I think Orange Soda will make a really nice transition shade, or if I want something just a little bit more subtle, like still warm but not too pigmented, I think Orange Soda will be a great addition to have in my quintet. It will be nice to reach for this palette more. Like, there was a point in time last year where this and that Pillow Talk Quad from Charlotte Tilbury were like the only two eyeshadow palettes that I was reaching for on a regular basis. And I did finish one of the shades from this palette, and I do have Pan on Dusty Rose here. But for the most part, I haven't reached specifically for Orange Soda too much. This does seem like a harder pressed matte, not like some of the other mattes that I've hit pan on from ABH. Those ones always seem to be really soft and easy to pan on. I think this one will be like a true intermediate shade. So this is the quintet I'm working with. Very interesting. It's either a really cool tone shade or a really warm shade. I am really glad to have 3 mattes in here. I just prefer having more mattes to work with because I do tend to use multiple mattes in a look, and I might reach for 1 or 2 shimmers, but if I had like 5 shimmers, they would be competing with each other a lot and I wouldn't be able to reach for all of them more. That is awesome, especially these 2 warmer mattes I think are going to be great for whenever I transition into more autumnal looks. Yeah, so like I said, I will not have another update until I have pan on one of these shades, and that way I'm not stuck to like a monthly schedule, and every update will be interesting because you know that I'll be rolling at least a new eyeshadow in. I do have several years worth of Pan Those Eyeshadows content, and I do have playlists for each of the years that I did pan those eyeshadows, so I'll have that in the description box if you'd like to see more. But in the meantime, that's everything I have. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!